Hey, singers, songwriters, and musicians, we're live. So, you want to record a song with incredible, great sounding recording mixes without spending a boatload of money? Well, you're in the right place. I'm Glory St. Germain from Ultimate Music Theory, and my very special guest is Graham Cochrane, founder of the Recording Revolution, one of the world's most beloved recording and mixing YouTube channel with over 500,000 viewers each month. Wow, that's impressive. Now, if you haven't already, please be sure to join the Ultimate Music Theory Facebook group and connect with our music community of musicians, teachers, and educators like Graham Cochrane, who are willing to share ideas and simply make the world more musical. Please welcome the multi-talented singer, songwriter, musician, recording artist. Oh my God, the master himself, Mr. Graham Cochrane. Welcome.
Wow, that was you made me sound impressive. That's awesome.
I did.
My kids would be like, nah.
Well, you sent me the check. I thought I should go with it.
Okay, good. Yeah. You did good.
Well, thanks for being here, Graham. I really feel blessed that you're sharing with us today. And to our viewers, if you're just getting started in recording, we really have a great opportunity because we got the expert here, Graham. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the live. We've got some people, Jacqueline, she's already putting in our keyword, which is record, because you want to get the guide to a great radio worthy song in 6 steps, and it's completely free. It's a gift from Graham, so make sure to enter the word record and our solo bot will follow up with you. Now, before we get into all those details, Graham, we want to back up maybe a couple of years and just learn about how you got started in your music lessons.
Yeah, so my dad got me into music. He's a singer and trumpet player. So we had a musical house, and I learned early on that I could sing. I had at least an ear for singing. So they just encouraged me to just sing a lot in school, like little, second grade recitals and Christmas performances. And that came naturally to me, and I always liked it. So I started with that. And then when we had band, and think in 4th grade, and you could pick an instrument, my dad's like, pick trumpet, because then we don't have to pay for another instrument. I already have a trumpet. So I learned trumpet. And I did that all through high school, and I played in, the pep band, and we didn't have a marching band per se, but we played all the football games and concert band. Nice. But I never loved trumpet as much as I loved singing. Mm-hmm. So in middle school, high school, all the guys were getting together. They wanted to make a middle school band. Nice. And they said, they had all the instruments covered, and said, Graham, you can be our singer. Oh, nice. I said, that's great, but like, I don't want to just stand there and sing. Like, you all get to play an instrument. Like, I want to play something too. So I had to learn an instrument that I could play and sing at the same time, and trumpet wouldn't work. Doesn't work. So I taught myself guitar just so I could, have something strapped over me and not feel like an idiot, because that felt weird to me. But I learned that I loved the guitar, and I loved writing songs and being able to just create just myself in my room. So I think in middle school is when my love for playing guitar and songwriting and writing rock songs and pop songs kind of grew out. And that's something that I thought was going to be my life. I was like, this is it. I'm going to be a rock star. Right. I'm going to just write songs. And in that process, I also learned that I had a love for recording music.
Right.
We had that classic, your high school band wants to make an album. Mm-hmm. And we how much money do we each have? How many studio hours will this buy us? And it wasn't that many. And so then we got nervous, like, well, would we be able to make the recording we truly want in that short amount of time? Right. And we said, what if we just pitch our money together instead and buy some basic recording equipment, which back then it wasn't even computer recording. It was like a hard disk multi-track recorder from Korg or something. Yeah. And we decided we would try that out. We're like, we don't know what we're doing, but at least we'd have all the time in the world to figure it out. No pressure. So we bought it, set it up in one of our friends' houses, and nobody wanted to read the manual. Nobody wanted to figure this thing out. The manual wasn't written for musicians. It was written like from scientists to scientists. It's like super technical. But I was so determined to make our record, I didn't want to learn it either. It was like a means to an end for me. And I think a lot of people, a lot of musicians, recording equipment, the recording process is somewhat of a means to an end. It scares me, overwhelms me. But if I can get my recording, I'm happy. That's where I was.
Mhm.
But as I started to play with this thing, with these little faders, I realized this is just another instrument. This is just
Right.
another thing. It's a songwriting tool. It's an instrument you can learn how to play. It's all part of the same thing. So I would sing a little bit. I would play the guitar, record a little vocal, and then I could try a harmony with myself on the recording. And it
Mhm.
was like, oh my gosh, I can figure out all these parts by myself. So my love for what we'd call multi-track recording, where you have all these different tracks, my love for that like grew in high school. I was like, this is super cool.
That's super cool.
I
Well,
have to pursue this.
thank goodness you read the manual.
I know, right? I know.
I think, you know, and I want to give a shout out to our viewers and listeners today. So even if you're watching live or watching the recording later, just let us know what you are excited about doing with your songs. So whether you want to record, whether you want to be the singer, whether you want to play an instrument, where does recording fit into your music? And honestly, Graham, sometimes as a music teacher, I want to record my students. And now you're kind of giving me a great idea. Wouldn't it be fun to record your students and then maybe give that as a gift to, you know, parents at the end of the year? Because obviously you were recording from a very young age. And what did you do with your first recording? Like, did you try to get it on the radio? Did you just play it for friends? Like, what was the first thing you recorded? Where did it go?
Oh gosh. So the album we made as a band, I don't know where that music went. That kind of disappeared. But I almost like I moved on from the band. I saw my future. I was like, I don't need you guys. I'm gonna do
Right.
this all myself. I started playing with drum loops, and I learned to play bass. Like I just wanted to do it all myself. It was just fun. It was just
Right.
creativity in its purest sense. And so when I went off to college, I had finished a record I made in my bedroom in high school, my senior year, and I got to college my freshman year. And I would play at this coffee shop and a couple of coffee shops on campus and right off campus. And I would burn CDs. Man, this is
Yeah.
making me sound old. Burn CDs on my Dell desktop. And I had a label maker. I would slap them on there. And I would just sell them for like $5. It was like 12
Yeah.
songs. I would just play,
Mhm.
and just get it out there. I was so proud of it because to me, I had created something that felt like a full band, but it was just me. And I did it in my dorm
Amazing.
room.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't good. I mean, the quality wasn't good. The songs weren't good, but I was having so much fun.
Mhm.
Uh, and I learned that it was both easy to dabble in, which I like, things that are easy to kind of dabble in, but also very complex. I knew there was so much I didn't know because when I would listen to my stuff and then I'd listen to what's on the radio, if you took away just the talent differential, like let's say we were close to talented, which I wasn't there, but I understood talent was an issue, but I could tell there was something about the quality that
Exactly.
was different. And I needed to learn more stuff, which is what I went to college for, was audio engineering and recording. So I knew I'd be in the right place.
Yeah. And what was sort of the motivation, because you started your musical journey into the recording business, and what was sort of the deciding factor that flipped you from, okay, this is fun, to, hey, I could make a living doing this?
Well, plan A was be a rock star. And so, and I
That's
tried really hard. I mean, my senior year, I made a record. We brought in a Nashville producer and touring drummer and session players, and we shopped it to labels, and I did all the right things. And when that kind of what no one was really that interested, they're like, nah, good, no, not really. When that was not looking like I needed it to look, I needed plan B.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to work at a desk job. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. Ironically, I ended up doing that for a couple of years. But what I thought I could do was I could work in a studio. I was like,
Mhm.
if I'm not going to be the rock star, at least I can be around music. I can be around the equipment. I can interact with musicians, and it would be way more fun. So that was plan B. So take my degree, interned at a big $5 million studio, was working my way up to be the staff engineer that they were going to hire, all of us interns fighting each other to get
Right.
that one spot. And that was my hope and dream, was like that I could make that a career.
Yeah.
That process though, what I learned was I actually didn't like the environment in the studio. It wasn't fun anymore. These
Mhm.
people, it's like anything. I mean, it became a
Right.
business. They needed to get the bands in, get the bands out. They didn't really care about the music, and it was no offense to them. It's just, it's
Yep.
all how many bands can we get? We got to pay the rent for this place.
Yep.
And so I didn't like the vibe anymore. And I thought, you know what? I've got recording equipment at home. I can just freelance. I know
Right.
bands. Why can't I just skip the whole studio and just do it in my apartment? If as long as they're cool with that environment, I know I could make a good sounding record. And so I went into freelance right away and had way more fun.
Yeah. Well, and we're glad you did, because I think you've not only done this for yourself because it's fun, but now you're sharing all these knowledge. And that's I mean, I'm always a student. I mean, I'm a teacher, but I'm also always a student, and I love that you're sharing this. I think one of the things that you probably realized is that through your journey, you could actually share this and solve a lot of issues, because in learning and reading the manual and your own recording experience, and now you're connecting with thousands of musicians and recording artists. And in this day and age, like you said, you don't have to go buy the DVD or CD anymore. You can actually learn it online. What's maybe one of the things that you see that holds people back from getting into starting their own recording studio?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things. Some people, they're overwhelmed by it. They just think,
Yeah.
gosh, I don't know what to buy. It all seems confusing. How do you hook it up? Like
Mhm.
I take for granted the simple things like how you plug in a microphone cable or what type of cable you need. And so some people are just overwhelmed by the basics.
Yeah.
That could be you, or it could be they've been duped into thinking I need a certain amount of equipment or certain amount of spending on equipment. Like
Right.
that's what really was the genesis. One of the genesises of the recording revolution for me was I was so irritated with all the audio forums and I don't know if Facebook was really very popular back then, but groups online where people would just give advice to budding recording engineers and musicians
Right.
that they had to spend a certain amount of money on equipment. And
Yeah.
so some people are overwhelmed because like I don't have enough money to buy all the things.
Exactly.
Um, and then the third thing that holds people back is ironically the fact that they are perfectionists,
Yeah.
and so they've been working on the same album for like 10 years.
Right.
And they just need to hear that it's not, I'm sorry, it's not going to be perfect. It's not even going to be as good as you want it to be, which is
Mhm.
hard pill to swallow. But I really am a believer in what Ira Glass said, that famous quote about the key to getting as good as you hear in your head or see in your head, whatever the art form is you do, is a large body of work. It's
Yeah.
not perfecting that one body of work. It's years and decades. So I figure the fastest way to get better is finish a project as quickly as I can and move on to the next project. And
Right.
so a lot of people get stuck on that one project and they just need a little nudge to just finish it and do the next one.
Yeah, that's actually great advice. I think not only in recording an album, but almost in anything that you do. As an author, I know it's like, okay, well, you're just going to keep dwelling on this one book, or you're going to finish it and get on and start writing the next book. And sometimes you do. You're always going to go back. As I've written a lot of books, and I go back and I go, oh, I can't believe I missed that. But let it go and just keep going on and writing the next song, because I think you just get better and better every time you do it. And
Absolutely.
in sharing these ideas with us, you're giving me a lot of feed for thought, because I think what you're teaching in your program is really applicable to almost anything that we do. Go do something you're passionate about, learn, be open to being coachable and receiving information. And three, just do it, like start, because even when you think about our interview here today, where did I start? What kind of microphone do you use? Where do you put it? All those little details, sometimes they hold you back. And I'm really grateful that you're actually giving us some really good tips today. So how did you go from musician, you're recording, you're in your own studio, you've released albums, you've taken the education that you need to get you to the next level. So now you're a master at all of these things and getting to be known as an expert. How did you go from there to the recording revolution? What was sort of that step that said, hey, I can help a lot of people?
Well, for one, I didn't feel like a master, and I don't think I was a master or an expert. I started the recording revolution as a way to get my name out there for more freelance work. So
Oh.
my wife and I had moved from Virginia to Florida
Hmm.
to help a buddy start a church. So we all kind of just like left our jobs, relocated, said, sure, let's go on an adventure. And
Hmm.
I got a job down here. I was volunteer leading worship at the church, leading the band. And then I was working during the day. We had our first baby, bought our first house, and then the company I started working for ran out of money. This is during the recession,
Right.
2009. So I
Hmm.
lost my job. I was always freelancing nights and weekends, but now I was trying to ramp that up to be more full time. And I didn't know anybody in Florida. I didn't know anybody in Tampa. So I thought, well, how can I double dip? I'll try to get to know people in the city, but what if I just started putting stuff online?
Right.
And I didn't know anything about creating content or getting found online, but I was at least intelligent enough to know if I don't put anything online, no one will ever hear of me online. And if I do, maybe they will. That was like my
Yeah.
strategy. So the idea was I'll just share what I'm doing in the studio, put some stuff out there. I felt confident in my abilities, but I never sought out to be a teacher. And I think,
Right.
a lot of people, if you're sharing content online, feel like, well, I'm not the expert, or who am I to share this stuff? Because we're all, like you just said, we're all learning still. Like, I don't know when you get to a point where you've figured out enough that you're like, hey, I'm the master at this. So it's
Yeah.
more of, I got a little nervous about that, but I didn't think anybody would be following me anyway online. So I wasn't
Yeah.
worried, you know? But my thought was, can I help my friends though? And
Yeah.
that's the way I view Recording Revolution 10 years later is I have literally a group of real friends in mind. I know their names, I know their life, and they're
Mhm.
musicians. They're not audio people. They don't want to be audio people, but they want to make their records sound amazing. And they
Yeah.
think like a musician, and they're overwhelmed. So I think,
Mhm.
oh, can I help them? Yeah, I can definitely help them. I can
Yeah.
tell them what to buy, what not to buy, how to use it, how to make it sound good. And that is what I started doing online, putting out videos, putting out articles, helping those kind of people. And in a way, I was learning from, we know the whole online business thing, learning about marketing and learning about figuring out who your audience is and positioning. Like I was doing all that without realizing it. Like I'm not for the audio snobs. I'm not
Yeah.
for you. They're going to
Yes.
look at me and think that I'm an idiot. But I'm not creating content for you. I'm creating content for musicians who are overwhelmed by all of you audio snobs and your
Yeah.
bad advice. So that's kind of what I just started sharing stuff. And believe it or not, some people found it,
Mhm.
liked it, and they asked for more. Can you do a
Right.
video on this? Could you explain how this works? And one thing led to another. And I realized there's some people here that actually want me to continue to exist online and help them. And that's what I've been doing. It's been almost 10 years later.
Wow. Well, and one of the things too, I mean, I mentioned earlier, you've got like million YouTube channel. It's incredible. And, I've watched a lot of your videos. And as a matter of fact, today I was watching and that left you a little comment on the interview you did with the Grammy nominated Jordan Sapp. And it's on the Recording Revolution YouTube channel, and it was so informative. And even though I'm not a recording, engineer, I am, a musician. I am a teacher, and I can still learn from what you're teaching and use it in some way in my own studio. We've got a lot of viewers out here that are saying, record, record, record. If you're looking for the information, Raylene says, oh, I have enough songs to make an album and would like to start a performance group with other musicians, contemporary dancers. Also want to record my students. So remember, Raylene, to put the word record in the chat box, and we'll be sending you that great information that Graham's going to share with us. Sarah Campbell said, I love simple tips for teachers. How can we make our students sound good without a ton of equipment? Is that even possible? I actually do have a question for Graham about how to get started with that. Judy says, record, record. Great advice. So when we talk about this, maybe you can share with us if someone is just getting started out, such as musicians or teachers, what is sort of the basic gear that we need just to get started?
Yeah. So it's gotten simpler and simpler every year.
Perfect.
So I think the most basic but powerful setup you could get is start with whatever computer you have.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a Mac person, you're already a step ahead because you have GarageBand
Right.
included in your Mac, which is not a toy. It is a full-fledged recording platform. It used to become kind of a toy, but they have made it so powerful. So let's say you're a Mac user, you don't even need to buy any software now. You already have the component number one, which is we call it a digital audio workstation, DAW, a DAW. That's the software, something to record into and then manipulate the audio afterwards. So GarageBand's great. I did a whole video series on my YouTube channel where I did a whole
Nice.
song in GarageBand. It was a $300 recording studio. It's a whole challenge you can watch. So the
Wow.
software was free.
Yeah.
Then you need a box to get your microphones and your cables and all the sound into the computer. And we call this an audio interface.
Okay.
And so this could be a USB, it could plug in USB, it could Thunderbolt these days, it could be Firewire. And this little box, there's so many brands that make them. Focusrite is a great brand. Personas is a great brand. But you can get one for $99 or less that will have at least one microphone connection. So even if you have stage microphones, you got the regular stage microphone cables, they will plug right into this. You can control the level, and it converts it to the signal that go into your computer. It'll show up in your GarageBand software. If you're not a Mac user, if you're on PC, Pro Tools is one of the most popular platforms for recording and mixing, but they have a free version called Pro Tools First.
Oh, nice.
And you can record and mix up to 3 songs. It all saves in the cloud. So if you're just getting started with students, it's free. It limits you to 16 tracks, but that's plenty. I did a whole series where I did it on Pro Tools First, just to prove that you don't even need paid software to do it.
Right.
But of the box, the software, and then at least one microphone. It could be just a stage microphone if you have one at your school or at your church or your venue, but it could also be like one of these, a condenser microphone. It's a different type of technology inside, but typically we use this type of mic for vocals or acoustic guitar or piano, things where you want a lot more detail or clarity on the track. You can get one of these for less than $100, different brands. So you're really looking at a microphone for $100, an audio interface, the box for $100, and maybe a mic stand, a cable, under $300 if you have the free software on your computer, and you're off to the races. I mean, that's all you need to get started. And a lot of these softwares like GarageBand comes with a virtual drum loops and all these kind of things. You can bring in drums, you can play other instruments if you have a little keyboard, or even on your laptop keyboard, you can bang out some notes, play some organ parts. I mean, you don't need much more than that.
So it's interesting because if you can play keys, you can almost play any instrument because you're recording, right? And looping a drum track or whatever you want to come up with. I think creativity has never been so available as far as recording and maneuvering all of these sounds. One of the things that I noticed in your interview this morning that I watched on YouTube, you talked about the quality of vocals being sort of 50% of what was important, and then adding the other components. Can you just maybe expand a little bit about when you're recording this? So now what do you do? Like, how do you bring out the important parts of a song?
Yeah. So let's say you've recorded, your piano part or your guitar part and a vocal. Let's say it's a simple song. Let's say now what we can do what's called mixing. And mixing is like, Photoshop for photographers, where you can manipulate the photo afterwards, or when they color grade a film, they do all the special effects in a movie. They've already filmed it, but now it looks even more amazing. That's what we're doing with audio, is how do you manipulate that to make it more of what we want to hear? The easiest things to do, your 2 most powerful tools are a compressor and an EQ, which is short for equalization. EQ is the easiest one for everyone to understand. It's like when you're in your car and you turn up the bass, the treble, or the mid-range to make your stereo sound have more bass or less bass. It's very simple. It's the frequencies that we're all used to. Just like an orchestra has low-end instruments and then high-end instruments. So the EQ allows you to manipulate the frequencies of every individual track. So we could take a vocal and we can say, it sounds a little too like low end and beefy, and we want to be a little more bright and airy. So we can reduce some of the low end, the bass of the vocal, and we can increase some of the upper frequencies that make the air come out, that nice shimmer. And so you can use an equalization or an EQ plugin, which come for free with these pieces of software, to manipulate the individual track to make it a little bit more of what you want to hear. And then a compressor is one of the more confusing to learn at first, but simple in concept, is the human voice, for example. Better than anybody, the human voice is such a dynamic instrument.
Absolutely.
Right? It's even if you're singing at the same volume, if you sing a vowel versus a consonant, it'll be louder, right? And ah is just louder than or even certain vowels like an E. Ah is louder than an E. So if you look at a recording of a human voice, even if that person is a really talented performer and is pretty consistent, it's going to be all over the place in terms of volume of the audio wave. And especially if you put that vocal on top of a full band or an orchestra, that vocal will get lost. Like some words will be heard and some words will be buried because of, the shape of their mouth or their volume. And so what we're used to hearing on the radio or in any song is the vocal always perfectly audible up front.
Right.
Even if they're almost whispering, they're still above the music, right? So that you can hear all the words. And the way you do that is with a compressor. A compressor is like a magical automated volume thing that it turns down the loud parts and brings up the quiet parts and makes the volume a lot more consistent of the vocal, which is what we're all used to hearing,
Right.
especially when there's no other visual cues, when there's a lot of dense music. If you and I are just in a room talking, we can see each other's lips, and so we can kind of gather clues that aren't there on a recording. So we need to make sure you audibly can hear everything. So an EQ and a compressor, which again come free with all these pieces of software, are your most important tools to making your vocals or any instrument sit exactly where you need it to sit and be audible.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you talk about that. I shared with you earlier, my husband, Ray St. Germain, who is a recording artist. He's in the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame, had a television
Wow.
series for many, many years, national television. And he was in the recording studio for, oh my goodness, 20 years because he was on television all the time. And one of the things that I remember him saying always was vocals up, vocals up. So it's kind of become almost a pet peeve when I'm listening to music. And as you know, sometimes it's on the radio that way and I can't hear the words and it kind of gets lost in the mix. And I'm like wondering, well, why do people not know this? Because it just seems obvious and yet it isn't always. And maybe they're thinking that, within when the singer's taking a breath, we can bring up a little bit of the, the guitar or something so that it's almost like a musical conversation between the vocalist and the guitar player or the keyboard player. But just to have it, so that the vocals are buried and they're equal, it's not pleasing to the ear, is it?
Well, it's funny because it almost is genre specific. So certain genres, the fan base doesn't seem to care about the vocal as much.
That's true.
That's not most, but there are some genres where the vocal is like another instrument that's equal to the other instruments, and it's like the way the melody works together. They almost don't even need to hear the words.
Right.
But most popular genres, obviously pop music, country, vocals are always louder. Lyric and vocal melody are, generally speaking, the most important part of a song to the average listener. And so most of the time, the vocal is up the way it should be. But there are some genres where it's more about the sonic experience and the vocal is just another instrument. And a good example, it's not even the best example because there's no lyrical content, but I think about Pat Metheny, and his group. It's again, they use vocals literally as an instrument. There's no lyric. It's just oohs and ahs, and they play off each other. And it's all about how they blend together. But typically speaking, I always think of, the mom rule. Like, can your mom hear your vocals? Because your mom wants to hear what are you saying? What are the words? And if the mom couldn't hear it, then there's something wrong, because the average person is more like your mom than you think. They just want to know, what are you saying? That's what they're going to repeat and sing over and over again. And so, but I will say, when I as a songwriter and singer, when I started recording, I wasn't very confident in my voice, and so I would mix my voice lower because I didn't really think it was that great. And so it's almost insecurity. I hear a lot of my students, their mixes, the vocals a little too low, and I think they're just insecure. So I just tell them, hey, just bump it up. I know you'll get better, but you got to get the vocal up there.
Yeah, you're making me smile, Graham, because my daughter, Sherry, is a music producer in Las Vegas, and she's also a singer and, multi-instrumentalist such as yourself. And I remember when she started recording, she was, I don't know, maybe 10 years old, and she used to think that the acoustics were better. So I remember, her bedroom was her recording studio, same kind of thing. And then she'd have the cable, and you would just see the cable going down the hall into the bathroom because she'd be recording vocals and the acoustics were better in there. But we had the mom rule that she'd play it for me. And And if I couldn't understand the words, they said, "You're a great songwriter. I can't understand the words. It would drive me crazy." So it's still kind of a joke today. She'll be, recording something and she'll send it. She'll say, "What do you think?" And if I can't understand the words, she's, "Oh, the mom rule," It's pretty funny. But we're going to share what are the 6 steps to record a radio ready song or be acceptable by the mom rule. Go ahead and enter the word record if you would love to get Graham Cochrane's 6 steps to radio ready songs. So I'm going to kind of give you a sneak peek on this if you're ready to share with us. So number 1, you have lyrics and melody. Can you expand a little on that?
Yeah. So when people come to me, they want to know how to make their song sound like it's on the radio. They want to make it sound amazing. And so they're always looking for mixing tips, like production tips, gear. And we have to go way, way back. And so if you look at any good song that's on the radio, and I just use that as a benchmark because I know everything's on Spotify these days, but what we all as a culture say, this is professional.
Right.
It doesn't start with all the gear and the tweaking. It starts in step 1, which is writing a really good song.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of what makes a good recording is how good is the song? Is it a compelling song? Is it a catchy song? And the human brain, the human ear will overlook so many sonic flaws if they like the melody and the lyric. It's so funny how we think once you get into audio land, it's all about having a perfectly polished song. And I can help you do that, but it's not all about that. There's certain songs that don't sound polished, but we love them so much because of the vocal performance, the lyrical content of the song. It's just a beautiful song. It's just a great song, or a happy song, or a sad song, or a powerful song. So the first step, and most people don't want to hear this, is practice writing better songs.
Yeah. I think that's a good one. So number 2, you have arrangement and production.
Yeah. So this is another one. People think that you write a song and, okay, back in the day, and maybe back in like your husband has more experience with this, is you would have songwriters, or let's say you're even an artist that writes your own songs.
Yes.
You would, if you were signed or if you were working with a label, they would bring in more help. They wouldn't just say, let's record that song. They would bring in a producer.
Yes.
Or multiple producers. What is a producer? Well, a producer listens to your song. They didn't write it, let's say. Maybe you wrote it, and maybe they think it's great. They say, okay, you know what, though? This song needs a full orchestra. Or this song should actually be stripped down, just acoustic guitar. Or you know what? I know you're rocking the whole song, but let's take verse 2, drop out all the instruments, and just have drum, bass, vocal, so it'll be real sparse. And then when chorus 2 comes back on, it's going to be such a nice contrast. They're thinking through, like a good director would, of a movie, like, how can we tell the story in a more engaging way? So you got a good script, great story. I didn't write it, but I'm going to then make it engaging from start to finish. So if we don't have a label bringing us a good, talented producer to do that for us, we these days have to be our own producer and say, okay, I wrote a good song. Hopefully it took Graham's advice. Now, before I even record it, I really have to think through, what's the arrangement going to look like? What are all the instruments I actually want to have? Do I want a cello part? Do I want female vocals to go alongside my male vocals? And map it all out so you know exactly what you're going to do at each section of the song long before you hit record, because a good arrangement makes the song move forward so much easier. It keeps the listener engaged. And that's what's good about great recordings. It's not even really the quality. It's that, again, it's interesting from start to finish.
Yeah, that is great, great advice. I mean, we're moving on to number 3, which is recording. But I think if you don't have step 1 and step 2, you're not ready for 3. So now we're recording.
3 is, yeah, that's what everyone wants to start. Let's start recording, right? And what do I need to buy to record? And we've already noticed we already had 2 steps long before recording, but recording is very straightforward. This is where it's all about getting the right equipment. And we talked about this a little bit, is you don't need to spend much more than $300. I mean, you can. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you don't need to. So it's very low cost. We are living in the best time to be interested in recording music in the history of the universe. We're really blessed to be born and alive right now because technology, equipment, competition across China and everywhere else has dropped the prices of all this stuff down, that for $200-$300, we can have the quality of what we call a signal chain, like all the pieces of signal, the quality that an audio engineer 50 years ago would have spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. And it's still ours is still quieter and cleaner than what they would have. They're fighting the noise of the tape, the noise of the console. We have it better. We have it so good. So it's all about getting the right simple components and then taking our time, because a lot of times, this is what I used to do. I was so more interested in manipulating the stuff in the software that I would record it as quickly as possible, throw up a microphone, sing it, throw it up on my guitar, play it, and get it in. Just get it into the computer, and then I want to mess with it.
Yeah.
And that's just like a photographer who's like, oh my gosh, just snap the picture. I can make it better in Photoshop.
Right.
And while that is somewhat true, the best photographers would say, yeah, but to make a really good photo, get it right in camera. Like take the time to wait for the lighting or bring the right lighting, get the exposure the right way, so the in-camera image is so good that when you get to the software, just a couple of little things here, it's going to be a better image. And so that's what we want to do on recording step is take our time to pick the right microphone, put it in the right place. If you don't know where to put it, just listen back and then adjust it and see just experiment with what it sounds like. Your daughter in the bathroom, oh, it sounds different in the bathroom than it does in my bedroom. All of that is real. That's all fiddling. And so much of the greatest recording engineers that made the most iconic albums of the world fiddled. And now we study their techniques, but they just fiddled around and discovered that this is cool. It's just art. There's no science. People want to make it a science, and I know there is science underneath it, but really the best of us have just played it like an instrument, and it's just art. So fiddle around and capture some really good performances.
Yeah, those are great tips for us. And now we're up to number 4, finally going to do some editing.
Yes. So a lot of times we skip this stage too, because we think, okay, I've recorded it. Now I'll do the stuff like we were discussing, EQing and compressing. And that would be considered mixing. Mixing is like cooking. Cooking is the best analogy. Yeah. Recording is putting all the right ingredients into the bowl. Mixing is literally blending them together. And then, it needs a little bit extra acidity or a little bit extra salt to really make it balanced, right?
Right.
But we can't get to that until we clean up our performances a little bit. So editing is the stage. Every professional song is edited in some way, shape, or form, some more than others. But editing could involve timing, so fixing any timing issues.
Right. And
even the best of us have timing issues that get fixed a little bit. You just wouldn't know it. Just, he came in a little too early on that drum fill. Yeah. Even the vocal, a lot of professional vocals, the vocalists are amazing. We talked about Jordan Sapp. He'll take a vocal, and once it's done, we'll do what's called vocal pocketing. We'll just take a slice of maybe someone's song and just their phrase, and they'll move it back a little bit, because if I just shift it back, it feels a little more vibey with the drums. They're just kind of manipulating the timing just a little bit to make it feel better. This could involve tuning, fixing any tuning issues on the vocalist. Yeah. This could involve bringing in some drum samples if they thought the snare drum sound we got wasn't as full as we wanted. So I've got a cool sample that I'll blend alongside, and just kind of getting all the pieces cleaned up, any breaths that are really annoying or loud, any pops or clicks of mouth noise, just cleaning all that up. So it's all clean. Everything's where you want it to be. And that's a boring but satisfying stage. If you do it right, when you come time to mix, everything is where it's supposed to be. Yeah.
And I think that's, each step that you're sharing with us, Graham, requires listening, obviously, but creativity to make it unique and make it stand out too. Because I think as you're going through every step, you want to stand out. You want to make that hit record, or even if you're recording a familiar song, you're just redoing it, you still want to make it your own. And I think some of that comes with every step as you go. But now we've arrived at mixing. So how can we, put our own brand on our mixing?
Mixing is where you get to have fun. This is where you get to add effects. You can blend things where if I want the guitars to be on the right and the keyboards to be on the left, or I want it to be really, quiet and really loud in the chorus, or I really want the vocal to sound like it was recorded in a small little room, but then in the bridge, I want the vocal to sound like it's in a bathroom or a cathedral, or this is where you can play, but it's also where you're balancing, it's like you're having a live performance and the band's on the stage, the front of house engineer, the mixing engineer's in the back, and they've got all of your tracks on stage, and their job is to make sure that everyone in that live venue can hear everything clearly. And so they might all be playing beautifully, but, it's hard because the vocalist, needs to get louder when the song gets louder. So maybe he'll turn up the vocalist for a second, or like you said, maybe the vocalist stops for a bit and now we've got like a guitar solo. So I'm going to jump over and turn up the guitar a little bit. It's making it dance together and keeping everything heard throughout the entire song. So at its simplest, it's just balancing. That's all mixing is, balancing everything together. But it can get very complex with interesting effects and automating things. And I think people get overwhelmed / excited about mixing. It's talked about a lot online because it's where I think people realize there's a lot to learn here.
Right.
But as you've noticed, there's already 4 steps. If you've done the first 4 steps before you even get to mixing is so much easier, and you'll sound like you're amazing because you did the first 4 steps really, really well. But that's where a lot of time is spent, is on mixing. And some of the best mixing engineers in the world are paid a lot of money to take a really good song and put their spin on it. But it's important, just like a film. You can have the best film in the world and it's edited beautifully, but it's the people that come in and they color grade and they add special effects and they just take it to that next level. It's a really important job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that often maybe we don't think about is that you go through these 5 steps, and maybe the 6th one, mastering, is like, what is that is that like the final step before you go and print off your label for your for your CD? Why do we have to do the mastering? You'd think like that you just record a song, you do a little bit of mixing and it's done. But what is the mastering process?
Well, I love that you said that, because I lean more to that, what you just said. I think it really is the recording and the mixing. If you've done your job in the first 5 steps, mastering should be almost non-existent. Mastering used to just be taking the multi-tracks off the console and literally putting it onto vinyl. So it was literally the transfer of the song from like 24 individual tracks on this tape, and how do we get it into a stereo track on the vinyl?
Right.
And then it evolved into, if you're doing an album, so there's 2 ways to think about mastering. If you've got a whole collection of songs, which is becoming less and less popular these days, mastering is then taking your, let's say, 10 songs that you've recorded and mixed and balancing them across time. Which song goes in what order? This song is actually a little too quiet compared to this song, so it seems like a drop off. So let's just balance out the volume of the individual songs. They're all similar volume. This song has way more bass than this song. It's distracting. So we can fine tune the songs to each other so that if you played the album all the way through, they feel like they belong together, all the songs, right? So it's simple. It's like mixing, but on a song basis. But that's if you have an album. If you don't have an album, you skip all of that. It's just the one song. It's your single, let's say, and you want to release it. What's the point of mastering there? Well, it's really your final stage of quality control. And really the most important thing here is volume, like final level. You could be recording and mixing a great song, but if you compare it to what you hear on Spotify right now, it's probably, your song's probably much quieter. And you're wondering, how do I get my song louder? That's the question I get. How do I get it as loud as, because there is a volume that's more commercially appropriate. And so this is where we use a process called limiting. A limiter is a specific tool that allows you to, again, it's like a compressor, but it lets you bring the volume of your track up, your average volume, without making anything clip or peak or distort. And it's just a specific tool, and there's some specific ways you can measure how you're getting your loudness. And so that's probably the most critical part, is getting that loudness up there.
Right.
In traditional mastering, it's always someone else that does the mastering for you. And you could view this as another set of ears listening to your song. You're so close to it. You're not hearing it as purely as you could. And someone else who has no emotional ties to it can hear it and go, you know what? I just need to fix the low end or the top end, or, and they just do some fixes. And that's great. That's a good use of mastering, is to bring in someone else to do some final touches. But it's really just getting it ready for MP3 release, Spotify, make sure it's loud enough. It's final quality control.
Yeah. One of the things too, I talk about my family, which is obviously musical, all my 5 kids and so on. And one of the things that I remember, just as we're going through these steps, which is also interesting, is this is very specific, recording this, and this. But as my husband was doing his television series, a lot of that was also recorded live. So that's you're still going to go through those steps, but in a different way. And that may be requiring another whole process. But what would the process of like these 6 steps, would they apply to if you were recording a live album? Like I know my husband did live albums, so they had, I think it was 6 people on stage, and obviously the recording engineer was there, and they were original songs. So he'd gone through the step of, you know, recording them, and are they popular? Does the audience ask them every night? He was playing that at that point in a club where he was performing every night, and people would say, I love that song, can you sing it again? So it was time to record. What happens when you do a live recording with a band and you're not in the recording studio, but it's actually a performance on stage? How do you, you know, preset all the mics? Like, could you just walk us through a live recording?
Yeah. So in a way, it's the exact same 6 steps. You've
Okay.
already done step 1 and 2. You've already written a good song and arranged it and decided what to play.
Right.
So you're coming up on step 3 on the live performance recording day. So with live recordings, it depends if it's primarily for a live performance that you also are going to record, or is it just like people in a room and it's primarily for the recording. But if it's
Right.
for live, like for example, I recorded a bunch of live albums for our church. So,
Yeah.
you know, primarily that the microphones were set up for people in the church service to hear properly there, but we also wanted to capture what was coming off the microphones. So it could be just the same microphones in the same places captured. Ideally, though, you would bring in a few additional microphones. If anything, you would want a couple of microphones in the audience, angled at the audience, away from the band, to capture 2 things. One, the sound of the people singing or clapping or
Yeah.
hooting and hollering or whatever, to give the audience that are going to listen to the recording a sense that it was in a room with other people. Because without that, you're never going to hear the people, right? So you
Right.
need that to pick up the people. Or the second thing you get is you get the sound of the speakers. If, like I say, it's in a church or a concert hall, you get the sound of everything coming through the speakers, swirling around the room and being picked back up into those microphones, which is like a natural echo or reverb effect in a way. And that can be blended in with the microphones on stage closer to the band. And just one pair of stereo microphones capturing that adds so much of that live ambiance that if you don't have that, it's really hard for it to even sound like it was done live. It'll sound very small and closed off. So that's probably, I would bring 2 extra microphones minimum for that. But then it's the same steps. It's hopefully the band is good and they play. And then I was recorded. Now you can go back to your studio and you can actually do editing. You can actually edit a live performance. You can fix timing. Now it's a little trickier because if I move the drummer, well, I might have to move everyone else as well. But there's some tricks you can do to still tighten up a live performance. For example, last Easter, I was leading worship at a church and we recorded it for an album. And one of our last songs, I start out on this guitar chord. There's 4 chords. And the people are clapping, we're getting ready, and the kick drum's going. And I played the wrong chord from the 3rd thing. So it's like, bah, bah, and I'm like, bah. And everything else about the song was so great, but I played the wrong chord. Well, after it's recorded, I can go back and pull myself playing it from right somewhere else and replace it and fiddle with it. And in the live recording, you never know that I played the wrong chord. So I can fix my flaws, right? And the reason why you would do that, because some people are purists, right? And they're like, don't edit a live recording. The reason why is in a live setting, so many of your flaws are forgiven because there's visual cues. The sound is so exciting and loud. You don't notice the flaws as much. Plus, it's gone. And it's just your memory. You only remember the good stuff.
Yes.
A recording is forever. There's no visual cues. And it's not loud, exciting music. You're just listening to it in your earbuds. So you will notice every flaw. And that will distract you from the song. And your job is to remove all distractions, not make it perfect, but remove all distractions that pull the listener out of the moment. And so any of those distractions you can easily fix in editing. And then you follow the same mixing, mastering, and you're good. You're good to go.
Yeah. That's awesome. You know, you talked about recording in the church. So sometimes people ask me, how did I get my name? My name is Glory, as in glory, hallelujah. So
awesome.
the story is that my mother was in church Christmas Day and listening to the Christmas music. And so in our church, there was a lot of congregation singing in addition to the choir, which was always my favorite part. Was the harmonies in our church were phenomenal. Like if you came to church, you better sing. The end.
Yep.
So it was Christmas morning and my mom was at church and I decided that I wanted to come and hear the music. So I was born on Christmas Day and just
Wow.
in time for supper. And to this day, Christmas obviously is my favorite time of year, but that's why she said, you know what? Glory to God. The child arrived on Christmas Day listening to Christmas songs. So I was blessed and double blessed that day. But it was,
Wow.
just really dear to my heart. I think that was my first introduction to music, was just
Mm.
listening to it in the church. And, of course, my Sunday school class and everything was all about singing. So I still love the harmonies and have my favorite, hymns that I like to hear again and again. And they also did a recording in our church too. So that was pretty cool.
That's
I
awesome.
I do want to mention that for those of you that are, we've got a lot of comments in here. I'll have to go check them out after, but I want to make sure that you enter the word record in order to get Graham's Cochrane's guide to creating a radio worthy song in 6 steps that is completely free. It's a $17 value. And I actually said to Graham, it's really worth more like 17 million, because if you can get a great song recorded and on the airwaves, you're off to the races. So make sure to enter record and we'll send you all the details, or you can go to recordingrevolution.com, download your copy today. And it's just an incredible, Graham shared a few tips for us today, but I'm sure you're going to benefit from getting all of that. Go through it and experiment. Don't be afraid to get started. He's given you so many tips that you can get started with today. I'm even excited about dabbling in a little bit of it and seeing what I can come up with. So I just want to say thank you so much, Graham. I've really enjoyed learning from you today. Is there any parting thoughts that you want to share with us as we get started?
I would just say, like you said, just dabble in it and think about recording from a musician standpoint. I think the musicians in the world have a better chance of making a good recording than the technical scientists in the world. So you got everything you need. It's all up here. Just start fiddling with it and don't be scared.
Don't be scared. Okay, we got that. So remember, enter the word record and recordingrevolution.com. And I will see you guys and be listening for your tunes coming up on the radio or wherever you might like to play them.
Yes.
Thanks for joining me, Graham.
Yeah,
Have a
thanks
great
for having
day.
me, Glory.